What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. So, special interactions for the Shadow Isles part 2. I covered the first part last week and based off some of the feedback, there's quite a few champions I still need to cover. So the first one is going to be Viego, then I'm also going to go through Nocturne and Kindred and Maokai. And then I'm going to finish off with a story. So the story revolves around Callista, Hecarim and also Ledros as well, which I found out a little bit about in the first interactions on the Shadow Isles. So anyways, without further ado, let's kick things off with Viego.
Hello, my darlings.
Hello, Uncle.
Oh yes, his uncle, isn't it? Hello, my darlings. Okay.
I've dressed for the occasion in red.
Your coat is centuries out of fashion. There can be no justice, only revenge. You hardly know what it is to have your heart broken.
What delightful agony we shall inflict.
That is the price they pay for defying their king.
The living will fall.
No matter if they live or die, they will all serve.
Okay.
We shall pierce their treasonous hearts.
Was your doubt so different? Your disloyalty?
There's nowhere to hide.
So bold for a schemer and a liar.
The shadow approaches.
And I am the darkness that will swallow the shadow whole. The darkness, like hunger, only grows. Rise, beast of Gebauer! Nothing will escape. Echoes of my wounded past. I see myself in their anguish. Shadows of men, hungry to remember. See how my thralls scour the world. This is my anguish made manifest. There is no rest in death. Join the rest. One shadow subsumed by many others. This pale world offers no solace. I will not be made to wait. I hear her calling for me.
Ooh.
All this for her.
His voice sounded a little bit different then, didn't it? At least at the beginning.
I will take back what is mine. All of it. Without her, there is only darkness. Fate cannot stop me. Nothing can. My victory is simply a matter of time.
These little scamps will burn.
So I think that might be the end for Viego. I think it is. I think the rest is action. So that was good. Good to listen to his interactions with other members of the Shadow Isles. And maybe it's just me, but his voice reminds me of Pantheon's. It's very similar to Pantheon's. There's certain aspects of it. There's certain aspects of Pantheon's voice that is similar to Viego's as well.
I will remember your name and shout it to the heavens. Echo for eons.
When I did a reaction review on Pantheon maybe a few months back, I went through his special interactions from Just Another Nobody, I think it was called, the guy who did them. But yeah, for me...
I will not be made to wait.
Yeah, there's just a little element of his voice that is, for me, similar to Pantheon's. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, who knows. But what I'm going to do now is, that was good, I'm going to move on to the next champion from the Shadow Isles, which is going to be, let's go for Kindred.
Men die, but Sharima lives forever. Nothing lives forever.
Yep, well said, Wolf. Well said. Almost
I
a full
know
experience.
what lurks in the shadows. She may have caught a glimpse.
But more soon.
Neither the flames nor the depths could claim me.
You fled us once.
It won't happen again.
Ooh.
The living will fall. They always do.
By arrow or by teeth?
We shall pierce their treasonous hearts.
Betrayers make for worthy prey.
The Isles will bloom again.
Strong roots to take hold in blighted soil.
The cycle has continued for eons.
We hunt, we kill.
And then we start again.
Yeah, that's a cool voice. Narcissus' voice. Nice.
I've seen the masks of the Kindred before.
All things see us on their periphery.
Betrayal buried Shurima. Hope revived it.
A vast land.
Oh, too much sand.
It's no good
The
for a wolf.
cycle begins anew.
He thinks he understands.
Fool. Embrace the darkness. None can avoid it. There's nowhere to hide. We always find them.
Sentinels of light don't fear the dark.
This one is mine.
She will fight you tooth and nail.
Ages pass, yet I remain.
I know her.
She has eluded us a while.
That's interesting that it mentioned this, that she has eluded us a while, and also when it went back to Gangplank as well, that he escaped us once before. So maybe he was close to death at some point as well.
Push back the darkness.
One can only stay it so long.
Then they're ours. As I live, all will die.
One does not avert the other.
I like him.
By my hand will Noxus rise.
He owes us the remainder.
I want it all.
Nice. By my hand, Noxus will rise, I think he said. He owes us the remainder, because obviously Aurelia cut his hand off. Nice. Okay.
Each spirit woven in tapestry.
Each strand woven with great care.
The masks they wear tell their tale.
Mask
I
Mother.
remember our beginning.
I as well, dear wolf.
Remember me, little one. Please!
He'll be mine.
He is for the other.
He's for the other.
Lamb, did you feel that?
Yes, something cold.
They need not know yet.
Ooh.
Look at them. What have they become?
So this is Ledros. This is Ledros. Okay.
Abominations.
Lamb, tell me a story.
As you wish, dear wolf.
Yours is known across the lands. Do you remember my name?
Mother.
Mask Mother.
How long must we wait?
For as long as it takes, dear wolf.
So maybe there's more than, because Nas has kind of alluded to it as well before, didn't he? You are a kindred, like you've seen more than one. Maybe Mask Mother is another equivalent type of kindred as well. So maybe there's more than one kindred and it's not unique just to Lamb and Wolf. And also, Lamb said to Wolf, that one is for the other. So
I am tired of waiting.
It is temporary. A promise lies in store.
Tell me a story, Lamb.
Once a little spirit traveled a long road through the dark.
They were alone.
The path they traveled was one all must walk alone.
Where were they going?
The same place that all paths lead, to an end.
We were there.
Yes, we were.
Tell me a story, Lamb.
Once there was a sacrifice exchanged for an oath.
What was given?
A hand to rule with.
And what was promised?
Nothing that would last.
Will we ever die, little lamb?
Perhaps, when at last our masks are forgotten,
What happens then?
it may be that another takes us beyond.
I will fight them.
Of course you will, dear wolf.
Tell me a story, lamb.
Once there was a star that crashed down to Earth.
Did it crush anyone?
It tried to, dear wolf,
Ruling
but
soul?
it met its match.
What happened to it?
The star was returned, and from it, a man was reborn.
Pantheon. Maybe.
Are you there, dear wolf?
I am, little lamb.
Are you sad?
I
What does it feel like?
am. A long hunt with no kill. What is waiting?
Death, on a smaller scale.
What is patience?
A motionless sea under a pale moon.
Okay.
Is it time?
Not yet. We must be patient.
I'm hungry.
I know.
I'm bored.
Not much longer.
Not much longer.
Hunt it down.
With grace and precision,
There the chase ends.
more lie ahead.
Is this our end?
It is an interlude.
Will they forget us?
They will try. We will remind them.
No one escapes.
Not for long.
By my hand will not.
Okay, so I think that is the end for Kindred. Really good. I love Kindred's voice lines, the ones that I did for her special interactions as well. Amazing. Some of the best. Hers and I'd probably say Jin's the best I've listened to. And this was a nice addition to that as well. One of my favourite ones is where Wolf said about Renekton, I like him. That just made me chuckle. That made me laugh. So that was really good. Interested to see her interactions as well with, by the sounds of it, other types of Kindreds as well. I now have Nocturne and Maokai to cover. So I'm going to go for Nocturne first. Let's go.
You will never be free, dragon.
Your base tricks are wasted on me.
He's got a point. He's got a point.
A new moon rises.
And sleep descends on feeble minds.
Okay, Nocturne. Okay.
The sun will fall.
I do not believe it.
Your kind despises you.
But no, that... really?
Oh.
You left your soldiers to die.
That was a lifetime ago.
Lysandra will slaughter your people. She promised we would fight together. You are king of nothing, Trundle. Lies! I'm king of all trolls! Your club will melt.
No, it won't.
No!
Takes everything
Go,
literally.
Pitch Beast. Their world crumbles. Tear their minds apart.
Doom Beast. Oi.
Stalk them. Torment their dreams. Fly, All-Seer. The nightmare never ends. Ah, yes. It has only just begun. I'm waiting. Your time will come. The skies darken. The fear grows.
There's nothing a good giggle can't fix.
Right, so I think that is the end of the special interactions for Nocturne. That was pretty good as well. Kind of scary, I don't lie, the guy is kind of scary. Not on Fiddlesticks' level, but he's getting there. He's getting there. Now, in terms of region, I've placed him in the Shadow Isles. Let me know if you agree or disagree with that. But when I was thinking of every single region it could go through, I thought it would have to be the Shadow Isles, and quite a few people have recommended to do it for the Shadow Isles as well. So based on that, at some point I will have to come back and do a champion review on Nocturne, because at the moment I haven't done one. So I will do that at some point, but for now I'm going to carry on with the theme, and the next region is going to be Noxus. So the last champion to do is Maokai.
They will pay for what they did to you.
All that matters now is the little ones.
The little saplings.
It's gonna be a great day!
You must be new here.
Vengeance from the seas.
And fury from the blighted lands.
I was going to say.
You accepted what became of us. What was I supposed to do? Noxus will not conquer the Shadow Isles.
Curious you think we'd seek to.
You are not wanted here, intruder.
Like that's ever stopped me.
Consume them.
Bark beast.
Eat your fill. Life starts small.
Little baby sapling.
Give them room to spread their leaves. And so, life springs anew. From death, life. The forest's vengeance. Ha! Your ship has come in. The seas awaken. Protect our grove! Begone, thief! You will find only death on these isles!
You ain't lying.
Investigating officer, Unit 6.
So I think that is the end of the interactions for Maokai. So yeah, that kind of wraps it up for me today, guys, in this one. This is the part 2 of the special interactions for champions for the Shadow Isles. I think I've now covered every single one for the Legends of Runeterra card game. Really good to go for every single interaction. And it just reminds me of some of the really good champions. Aurelian Sol is always good, Swain's good, Jin is good, and obviously, like I mentioned before, Kindred as well. But yeah, it was good to go through these. I will next be moving on to Noxus, and then when I've gone through Noxus, I'll be doing exactly the same thing and going through their special interactions for Legends of Runeterra as well. So yeah, I'm going to leave you here today, guys, in this one. Yeah, I will see you in the next one. So this is The Echoes Left Behind. I heard this is a pretty good story as well, and I have to read it before I move on to the next region. So, you ask, I do. So, let's go. So, The Echoes Left Behind by Anthony Reynolds. So, blood pooled beneath him, bright crimson against pristine white stone. His sword lay nearby, its blade broken. His killer stood around him. Doesn't seem so good so far. Shadows on the periphery, but he saw nothing except her. Her eyes stared into his own without seeing. His blood-splattered face was reflected back at him. He was laying on his side. His breath was shallow and weakening. Her lifeless hand was cold, but he didn't feel anything. A calmness descended upon him like a shroud. There was no pain, no fear, no doubt. Not anymore. His armoured fingers tightened around her hand. He couldn't be with her in life, but he would be with her in death. For the first time in what seemed forever, he felt at peace. "Hello, Ledros," said a voice that shouldn't be there. Ledros, his name. Right, so we found out a little bit about Ledros in the special interactions for the Shadow Isles. And clearly he has a strong connection to Callista. I think they're lovers, I think. There was an evil mocking laugh and a clink of chains. Don't tell me it's Thresh. "I don't know why you do this to yourself, but I have enjoyed seeing you suffer." Reality clashed over him like a tidal wave, threatening to drag him under. The blood beneath him was centuries old, flaking and brown. The stone was not white but black and cracked. The sky was filled with turbulent dark clouds lit from within by lightning. and everywhere the black mist coiled. She was still there for a moment, and he clung to her, unwilling to let her go. "My love," he breathed, but then she faded like ash on the wind, and he was left grasping at nothing. He was dead. Okay, and he was trapped here in this perpetual in-between. Ledros rose and picked up the shattered remnant of his sword. So basically he's died, but then so maybe the ghost of him is alive, I'm guessing. He levelled the ghostly blade at the one who had shattered the illusion of his memory. The hateful spirit lurked in darkness, leering at him, eyes burning with cold flame. His cursed lantern, there we go, it's Thresh, sat on a smashed chunk of masonry nearby, radiating beams of dead light, captive souls withering within. The Chain Warden. Thresh. Oh, how he hated him. The cursed spirit had haunted him for what seemed like centuries, taunting him, mocking him. Now he had found his way here. This was his sanctuary, the only place he could feel even a fleeting moment of peace before the horror of his reality reasserted itself. "Why are you here?" Ledros demanded. His voice was dull and hollow, as if he spoke from a distance or time far away, probably because he's dead now. "You were lost for quite a while this time," said Thresh. "Months, perhaps years. I don't keep track anymore." So what's he talking about? "You were lost for quite some time," said Thresh. "Months, perhaps years. I don't keep track anymore." Ledros lowered his blade and took stock of his surroundings. He remembered this place as it had been, white stone and shining gold bathed in sunlight. Protective white mists had wreathed the isles, resisting outsiders, obviously before Viego did his thing. When they had first landed, it seemed a land beloved by the gods, a place of wealth and knowledge and wonder, untouched by famine or war. It had just made it easier. There had been little resistance. So in essence, its resistance was the fact that it wasn't discovered. Once it was discovered, like it said there's no resistance. Now there was no sun, all was darkness. The ruptured, shattered remnants of the library loomed above, like some great decapitated corpse. Desiccated corpse. Chunks of stonework hung in midair, where they'd been blasted outward and locked in time. He had been a fool to think the gods had loved this place, for they had clearly forsaken it. Every time he re-emerged from the unformed madness of the black mist and reformed, it was here, where his mortal body had fallen so long ago. Every time it was the same, nothing changed. Right, let me read that again. Every time he re-emerged from the unformed madness of the black mist and reformed, it was here where his mortal body has fallen, so he's reformed where he originally died. But what's this though? He re-emerged from the black mist. The one waiting for him was new, however. It was not a change he welcomed. Out of habit, he reached for the pendant he had always wore around his neck, but it was not there, which might have been of the holy water, or not the holy water, the blessed water. Holy water's like vampires. No, the corpse-like growing within him flared brightly in rising panic. "Such a pretty trinket," said Thresh. Ledros' head snapped round, eyes blazing. Thresh held aloft a soft chain from which hung a delicate silver pendant engraved with 2 roses. "I am not one of your playthings, Warden," Ledros said. "Do not make the mistake of thinking you can toy with me." So he does seem like the anomaly. He does seem like someone that maybe can't be fully controlled by Thresh, and maybe his soul can't be taken in, absorbed by the lantern as well. Thresh smiled, exposing the shark-like teeth of a predator. "Of course not," he said. With a gesture, Thresh called his lantern. It came to him swiftly, then hovered just below his outstretched taloned hand. In the lantern's glowing deadlight, Ledros saw anguished faces pressed against their confinement before fading to be replaced by others. A horrific conclave of tormented souls. Thresh smiled, savouring their pain. "I don't need to torture you," he said. "You do that to yourself." Right. The Chain Warden stepped into the darkness, leaving Ledros utterly alone. A hollow wind ripped through the shattered city, but he did not feel it. He felt nothing but her. She was hunting, Ledros stepped into the mist, letting it float around him. Then he shifted through it. Right, interesting. Okay, interesting start to this story. Get to find out a little bit about Ledros, his position before he died, his connection to Callista, and also his relationship with Thresh as well. So let's go into what I might as well call Chapter 2. The black mist withered around him, full of hate, anger and fear, but he remained distinct from it, maintaining his sense of self. He was drawn towards her like a moth to candlelight, and just as unheeding of the danger, he whipped across what had once been the Blessed Isles, passing over wasted lands and the churning water of the straits dividing them. Whenever the black mist extended, reaching blindly searching, always searching, he was able to go. This was his sunless prison. Right, so when the black mist goes, wherever it goes, he can go as well. That's how I read it. Her burning presence presence within the darkness lured him on. She was close. Feeling the nearness of her, he stepped from the mist once more. He stood in a blackened forest, the trees withered and dead, their branches dry and cracked. The echoes of the leaves long since fallen rippled with the memory of a breeze far more gentle than the cold gale now howling through the dead forest. He sensed movement in the trees. His heavy boots crunched on blackened soil as he began to stalk it. His iron shield was strapped to his left arm, though he didn't remember securing it there, and he drew his sword. The leather wrapped around his hilt had rotted long ago, and while the blade was broken a few feet below the hilt, the ghostly outline of its full length could still be seen, glowing softly. Shattered and corroded by the ravages of time, it was a shadow of its former majesty. It had been gifted to him by the king himself, back when his monarch was a man to be admired and loved. Right, okay. The ground sloped sharply below, but he kept to the high ground, moving along a ridge marked with jutting stone and twisted roots. You want the high ground? He could see them now, shadowy spirits borne upon spectral steeds, galloping through the glen below. Is this Hecarim? They moved swiftly, weaving between the trees, east towards the sun that would never again rise over these shores. They moved as one, like a hunting party, and yet they were the ones being hunted. Ledros broke into a run, keeping pace with them. A voice echoed through the trees. "We come to you, betrayers." Ooh. It spoke not as a single voice, but rather as a score or more of them, layered and overlapping, a legion of souls speaking as one. So this is Callista. So when we went through Callista a few weeks back, I mentioned in her voice lines, her voice is an echo, and that's kind of a reflection of the pact she has with people, where she takes their soul, but in return they get some form of vengeance. And obviously she wants vengeance as well. The strongest of them was one he knew well. There you go, which is her. Ledros quickened his pace, running fast and low. The riders below had been forced to weave around massive stone formations and the boles of ancient desiccated trees. It slowed them, while the ridge he ran was straight. He quickly outpaced them and drew ahead of the hunted spirits. Ledros turned abruptly, stepping over the edge of a sheer cliff. He landed in a crouch at the base, some 30 feet below the earth cracking beneath him. He stood within a narrow defile, while the natural contours of the land had created a funnel. The riders would have to come through. With blade drawn, he waited. Here we go. The first of the horsemen appeared, riding at a gallop, a being of spirit and twisted metal, a vile mockery of the once proud knights of the Iron Order. They were nothing to him now, just hateful fragments of the men they had once been. A dark lance, its tip jagged and hooked, was clasped to the knight's mailed grip, and great curling horns extended from the helm. Seeing Ledros, he wrenched his mount violently to the side, making it snarl and spit. Its hooves were wreathed in shadow, and it seemed not to touch the ground at all. Had Ledros killed this one before, or had he been one of those that had survived his rampage and killed him? Right. So, and when he dies, he goes back to the place where he was before, I think. The other riders appeared, pulling their steeds up short. "Stand aside, bladesmen," one hissed. "We have no quarrel with you," said another. "Our quarrel will last until the end of time itself," growled Ledros. "So be it," snarled another of the deathly knights. "Ride him down." You shouldn't have stopped," said Ledros, a smirk playing on his lips. "That was an error." One of the knights was hurled from his saddle, a glowing spear impaling him. His steed turned to smoke as he hit the ground, a glowing spear impaling him. You know who that is. The knight screamed as he followed it into nothingness, condemned to join the black mist once more. His spirit went to that darkness willingly. "She's here," roared the lead rider, dragging his steed around to face the new threat. There was confusion among the others, caught somewhere between the desire to turn and fight and to flee in panic. They'd have been better off taking their chances at riding him down. At least a few might have escaped. Against her, all would be returned to the mist. Another knight was ripped from the saddle, a spear hurled from the mists, taking him in the chest. Then she appeared, looping like a gloom, like a lioness, on the hunt, her eyes burning with predatory light. Callista. Ledros' gaze was instantly drawn to the ethereal spear tips protruding from her back, and he felt a pang in the core of his being, as sharp as the blades that had ended his own life. He felt a pang in the core of his being, as sharp as the blades that had ended his own life. I thought it was saying that them blades ended his life. Right, okay. Callista padded forward, a spectral spear clasped in one hand. A knight charged her, hook-bladed lance lowered, but she rolled lightly out of the way. Coming to one knee, she hurled her spear, impaling the knight as he strode past. Even as she threw, she was moving towards the next enemy, which is obviously ties in with her abilities as well. She flexed her hand and a new weapon materialized in her grasp. A sword flashed down at her, but Callista avoided it expertly, slapping the blade aside with the haft of her spear, before swaying away from the falling hooves of the knight's steed. Lapping from a blackened rock, she twisted in the air and drove her spear down into the rider's chest, banishing him to darkness. She landed in perfect balance, eyes locked on the next victim. Okay, Callista don't play no games. Okay. Ledros had never met a woman as strong as Callista in his life. In death, she was unstoppable. And this is the thing as well. I think the more souls that she takes on that want vengeance, the stronger she becomes, the stronger the will becomes as well. While the others focused on her, two of the knights charged Ledros, blatantly seeking to escape Callista's methodical slaughter. Stepping sideways at the last moment, Ledros slammed his heavy shield into the steed of the first, knocking the spectral beast to the ground, legs kicking and sending its rider flying from the saddle. The lance of the second knight took Ledros in the side, punching through his arm and snapping halfway down his length. Nevertheless, Ledros retained his feet and spun, slashing out with his blade. He struck through the neck of the knight's steed, a blow that would have decapitated the beast had it been made of flesh and bone. Instead, it exploded into nothing with a keening scream. Its rider crashed to the ground. Ledros smashed the ghostly warrior backwards with a heavy blow of his shield as he rose, hurling him onto the point of Callista's spear. Her hunt, her kill. Ledros sheathed his blade and watched as she destroyed the last of the spirits. Tall and lean, Callista was in constant motion. Her enemies had been martial Templars whose skills at arms was legendary, yet she moved among them effortlessly, sidestepping lance thrusts and sword strikes, dispatching each in turn. Then it was done, and the only two left were Callista and Ledros. Let's see how this goes. "Callista," he said. She turned her gaze upon him, but there was no hint of recognition in her eyes. Her expression was stern, as it had ever been in life. She regarded him coldly, unblinking. "We are the Spear of Vengeance," she replied in a voice that was not hers alone. "You are Callista, Spear of the Argent Throne," said Ledros. He knew the words she would speak next before she even opened her mouth. It was the same every time. So this isn't the first time he's met her, right? "We are Retribution," said Callista. "Speak your pledge or be gone." And this is the thing, the more people that she takes on to join her, the more of her she loses. You know what I mean? She becomes stronger, I think, but I think the more of who she was dies as well. "You were niece to the king I saved in life, Ledros," said Ledros, and I didn't know that, so she was the niece of the king. "We are acquainted with each other." Callista regarded him for a moment, then she turned and strode away. "Our task is unfinished," she said without looking back. "The betrayers will suffer our wrath." "Your task can never be finished," said Ledros, hurrying to keep pace. "You are trapped in a never-ending spiral. I am here to help you." "How though?" The guilty shall be punished, said Callista, continuing to march back through the trees. You remember this, don't you? Said Ledros, drawing the pendant from around his neck. That gave her pause, as it always did. It was the one thing Ledros had discovered that could break through her fuge, even only for a moment. He just needed to figure out how to extend that moment. Callista came to a halt, cocking her head to one side as she looked at the delicate pendant. She reached for it but stopped herself before she touched it. I tried to give this to you once, said Ledros. You refused it. Uncertainty touched her eyes. I remember, she said. She looked at him, actually saw him. Right, Ledros, she said. Her voice was her own now. Ooh, and for a moment she was the woman he remembered, the woman he loved. Her features softened, even so slightly. I could never have given you what you wanted. I understand, said Ledros, even if I didn't at the time. Callista looked around, as if only now becoming aware of her surroundings. She looked at her hands, glowing from within as insubstantial as smoke. Ledros saw confusion, then anguish play across her face, then her features hardened. Would that I had never brought him here, said Callista. All this could have been averted. It was not your fault, said Ledros. I knew Maddis had claimed him. I could have ever ended if it came to this. No one would have questioned his death. No one would have mourned him. So I'm talking about Viego, I think. I knew Maddis had claimed him. Yeah, he wasn't always that way, said Callista. No, but the man we knew died long before all this, Ledros said, gesturing around him. We have a task to complete. And that's the thing. So she's obviously having doubts not doubts, but clearly they knew that he was a lost cause before they even reached the Blessed Isles, so maybe they should have stopped him or killed him at that point. Hope stirred within him. It was an unfamiliar feeling. Whatever it is, we will complete it. We will complete it together, just as, he said, but his words petered out as he realised his error. The cold mask had dropped over her features, and she turned and strode away. Despair clutched at Ledros. He'd failed again, just as he had so many times before. So what? I don't know what it failed at. Whatever it is, we will complete it together, just as he said, but the words petered out as he realised his error. He saw himself in the early years after the ruination, stalking the spirits of those who had killed her in life. Convinced that destroying them would free her, it hadn't. He spent countless years pursuing that goal, but it had amounted to nothing. So, right, so what I'm maybe getting is that she dies, doesn't she? He goes to try and save her. He tries to kill all these spirits, but it clearly doesn't work, and he's died as well in the process. He saw himself felling the arrogant cavalry captain, here we go, Hecarim, hacking his head from his shoulders and rendering him back to the mist. That one had struck Callista the final fatal blow and had long toiled seeking his end. So maybe he thought if he kills him, she might come back to life. Time and again they fought as the years and decades, the centuries rolled by, and the unseen stars turned overhead. But Hecarim was strong of will, and he returned to the black mist, of course, each time more monstrous than the last. Either way, it changed nothing. Callista became steadily more lost as she absorbed the vengeful spirits of the mortals who pledged themselves to her. This is the thing, the more than pledge themselves to her, the stronger she becomes, but she loses part of herself in the process, seeking her aid against their own betrayers. Once he had brought Callista face to face with Hecarim, a feat that had taken dozens of lesser deaths to achieve, he had believed that was the key to finally setting her free, and he'd rejoice as he saw the now monstrous creature Hecarim skewered. A dozen spears piercing his towering frame, but banishing him to the darkness had done nothing. A moment of satisfaction, and then it was past. Nothing had changed, just another failure added to his growing tally. At one point, despair drove him towards self-destruction. The purity of the one sunrise he'd seen since the blood had coursing through his veins burned him, his intangible body just dissipating like vapour. Guilt at leaving Callista behind crawled at him, but in the agony he had rejoiced, daring to believe he'd finally found release. Even in seeking final oblivion, he had failed, and he'd been condemned to the madness of the black mist once more. So he's, like you said, they're basically trapped as well. It is a curse for him as well. All the moments preceding his banishment blurred together in a never-ending cavalcade of horror and defeat. He roared as a purple-skinned sorcerer, right? cast him back to the darkness, tearing him asunder with runic magics. The savage joy he'd felt as he joined the slaughter in the streets of a festering harbour city overrun with a black mist gave way to a sudden pain as he was blasted to nothingness by the faith of indigenous witches. I think that's right. He laughed as a sword impaled him on its length, but his amusement turned to agony as the blade burst into searing light burning with the intensity of the sun. And again and again and again he'd been condemned to the nightmarish black mist, but always he'd returned, every time he returned to a land locked in stasis, walking in the same place, the same way. A being of lesser will would have succumbed to insanity long ago, as so many of the spirits had, but not him. Failure clung to him, but his will was as iron. His stubborn determination to free her kept him going. That was what ensured he came back over and over again. Snapping back to the present, Ledros watched Callista stalk away from him, intent on her unending mission. A creeping melancholia settled within him. Was it all for nothing, like Thresh said? There we go. Was Thresh right? Was his attempt to free her from the pain of retribution actually selfish? She was sleepwalking through this nightmare, unaware of its true horrors. Would she thank him were he to wake her? Perhaps she would despise him, wishing he had let her be. Ledros shook his head, trying to dislodge the insidious notion, even as a vision of Thresh, smiling predatory, appeared in his mind. "Get out of my head," he snarled, cursing Thresh. A new idea came to him suddenly, banishing his lingering doubts and fear. There was something he hadn't tried, something he'd never considered until now. "Callista," he called. She did not heed him and continued on her way, her step unrelenting. He loosened his sword belt and cast his scabbarded blade to the ground. He wouldn't need it anymore. "I betrayed you," he called out. Right. So he's got to kill himself so then his soul becomes part of hers. That's sad. Pretty smart at the same time though, especially if he's tried other things. But how's he portrayed her? She stopped, her head whipping around, unblinking eyes locking onto him. "I should have stepped forward as soon as the order was given," Ledros continued. "I knew Hecarim was looking for any excuse to be rid of you. You'd always been the king's favourite. It all happened so fast, but I should have been faster. We should have faced them back to back. We could have cut our way through them and been free together. I betrayed you with my indication, Callista. I failed you." Right. Callista's eyes narrowed. "Betrayer," she intoned. Ooh, an eternal spear manifested in her grasp and she began marching towards him. Ledros unstrapped his shield and threw it aside as she broke into a looping run. He opened his arms wide, welcoming what was to come. The first spear drove him back a step as it impaled him. His had been the true betrayal. He'd loved her, even if he'd only spoken those words aloud alone in the darkness of night. The second spear drove through him, hurled with tremendous force. He staggered but stubbornly remained standing. He had not stepped in to stop her being murdered. He was her real betrayer. Right. There we go. The third spear plunged through him and now he dropped to both knees. He smiled even as his strength leached from him. Yes, this was it. This was what would finally break her from the awful unending spiral. He was sure of it. Finish it, he said, looking up at her. Finish it and be free. They stared at each other for a moment, a pair of undying spirits, their unsubstantial forms rippling with deathless energy. In that moment, Ledros felt only love. In his mind's eye, he saw her as she had been in life. Regal, beautiful, strong. "Death to all betrayers," she said, and ran him through. Ledros' vision wavered as his form began to come apart, yet he saw Callista's expression change. The impassive mask dropping, replaced with dawning horror. Right, so she realised who he is. "Ledros," she said, her voice now her own. Her eyes were wide and seemed to fill with shimmering tears. She rushed to be beside him as Ledros fell. What have I done?" she breathed. So it's worked. It's worked by the sounds of it. He wanted to reassure her, but no words came forth. "I did this for you." Darkness crashed in and tendrils of mist reached to claim him. Callista reached out to comfort him, but her fingers passed through his dissolving form. Her mouth moved, but he could not hear her over the roaring madness of the black mist. His armour fell to the ground and turned to dust along with his sword. Blind terror beckoned, but he went into it gladly. Dimly he registered the pale spectre of Fresh, watching from the shadows with his fixed, hungry smile. Even the Chain Warden's unwanted presence could not dampen Ledros' moment of victory. He'd done it. He had freed her. It was over. Right, I wasn't expecting that. That's interesting. So not only do we get the connection between and the dialogue between Callista and Ledros, and a little bit of a fight between the what they're called, the Iron Order, Hecarim's cronies as well. But we can see that this isn't the first time he spoke to her, and everything else has failed. So I wasn't expecting this, but yeah, it looks like what he's done there has worked. Nice. So, Chapter 3. Blind, all-consuming terror, incandescent uncontrollable rage, claustrophobic horror, cloying and choking, and behind it all was the insubstantial hunger, the yearning to feed on warmth and life, to draw more souls into darkness. The cacophony was deafening, a million screaming tortured souls writhing and roiling in shared torment. This was the Black Mist. And only the strongest of souls could escape its grasp, only those with unfinished business. Blood pooled beneath him, bright crimson against pristine white stone. His sword lay nearby, its blade broken. His killer stood around him, shadows of on the periphery, but he saw nothing except her. This is the beginning. Her eyes stared into his own without seeing. His blood-splattered face was reflected back at him. He was lying on his side. His breath was shallow and weakening. Her lifeless hand was cold, but he didn't feel anything. A calmness descended upon him like a shroud. There was no pain, no fear, no doubt, not anymore. His armoured fingers tightened around her. He couldn't be with her in life, but he would be with her in death. For the first time in what seemed like forever, he felt at peace. No, something was not right. Reality crashed in. So this is basically right at the beginning. None of this was real. This was but an echo left behind, the residual pain of his deaths hundreds of lifetimes earlier. Thankfully, the Chain Warden was not here to mock him. How long had it been this time? There was no way to know. Decades or a few minutes. It could have been either, and yet it hardly mattered. Nothing changed in the vile realm of stasis, so when you die you go into the Black Mist, and you can be in there for a minute, you could be in there for years. But it sounds like people that have obviously unfinished businesses and people that are strong can escape. That's how I'm reading that as well. Then he remembered, and hope surged through him. It was not a sensation he was familiar with, but it blossomed like the first bud of a seemingly dead tree after rainfall. He turned and she was there, and for a moment he knew joy, true joy. She was herself again, and she had come to him. Now then he saw her expression, the cold, severe mask, the lack of recognition in her eyes. The hope inside him withered and died. Callista stepped past him, her head cocked as if listening to something only she could hear. "We accept your pledge," she said before turning and stepping into the mist. Then she was gone. Reaching out with his will, Ledros felt her now far away. Someone had called to her from a distant continent to the northwest. Someone else who had traded their soul for a promise of vengeance against whoever had wronged them. They knew not what horror awaited. Bitterness and bile filled Ledros. He cursed himself, twisting his hatred inward. There was no hope. He knew that now. He'd been a fool to think otherwise, so basically it's not worth. She was trapped for eternity, as were they all, including him. Only pride and stubbornness had made him think he could solve it, like a riddle, for all these years. Pride and stubbornness, traits that were much his bane in death as it had been in life, it seemed. The cursed Chain Warden was right. It was a selfish desire to free her. He saw that now. Callista may not be herself, but at least she was not tormented like he was. At least she had a purpose. Ledros yanked the pendant from around his neck, shattering the links of the thin chain. He hurled it into the mist. To even hope of anything more was foolishness. There could be no peace, not until the curse that had held the Isles in its forted grasp was broken. And so I must end it, Ledros said. Oblivion called. Right, so on to the final chapter, chapter 4. Thresh stepped from the darkness. He glanced around, ensuring he was alone. Then he knelt and picked up the discarded silver pendant. The fool had been so close. He was on the brink of bringing her back, and now after countless centuries of trying, he had abandoned his task at the very moment of success. No! Thresh smiled cruelly. He liked seeing hope wither and die, like blighting fruit upon the vine. As what could have been sweet turned to poison, it amused him. He opened his lantern and tossed the pendant within. Then he stepped back into the darkness and faded from view. After a time, the rattle of his chains faded, and he was gone. Right. So it looks like he was so close. Thresh knows all along what needs to be done. Ledros has failed. But it says there, the fool had been so close, he was on the brink of bringing her back, and now after countless centuries of trying, he'd abandoned his task at the very moment of success. So clearly it's something to do with the silver pendant. He obviously tossed the pendant into... He tossed the pendant into his lantern. So how could he have done it then? Did he need to give her the pendant? I don't know. Maybe someone can explain that. Or maybe it's left open to interpretation for a later story. I don't know. But I can't quite work out how he could have done it. He killed himself. He said he was the betrayer. He showed her the pendant. Did he give her the pendant? But anyway, that was really good. That was a really good story revolving around Ledros. Now I've got a better appreciation of who Ledros is and his relationship to Callista. Nice to obviously find out a little bit more about Callista. Also Thresh and also Hecarim as well. So it was nice. At least 3 main champions, and Ledros is another kind of champion as well. So that was good. So thank you for the recommendations for that. And I think I'll leave it here today, guys, in this one. Hopefully you enjoyed my thoughts and reactions to this story, The Echoes Left Behind. And also the 4 new champion reveals for the Legends of Runeterra for the Shadow Isles as well. And I will see you guys in the next one.